If you've looked into building a WordPress website, there's a good chance you've come across Elementor. And there's a reason for that. Elementor is popular because it makes WordPress websites much easier to work with. You can design pages visually, move sections around, update content without touching any code, and give marketing teams more control over their website. That's why so many businesses, agencies, and freelancers have used it for years. But Elementor has also had one big criticism following it around. You would hear people say, Elementor is easy to use, but it's bloated. Elementor websites can be slow. The code behind the page is messy. Other website builders like Bricks or Breakdance are cleaner and faster. And honestly, that criticism did not come out of nowhere. You see, for a long time, Elementor's biggest strength was ease of use. But one of the trade-offs was that the pages it created could be heavier behind the scenes than they needed to be. Now, if you're a business owner, you probably don't care about the technical details of how a page builder writes code. You care about simpler questions. Questions like, will my site load quickly? Will it be easy to manage? Will it hurt my SEO? Will I regret choosing Elementor 2 years from now? That's why Elementor 4.0 matters. This is not just another update with a few new buttons in the editor. Elementor 4.0 is Elementor's attempt to address the biggest argument against itself, the idea that it is too heavy, too bloated, and no longer the best choice for serious business websites. So in this video, I'm going to explain what actually changed, what bloat really means in plain English, and whether Elementor 4.0 changes the conversation for business owners choosing a WordPress website platform. To understand why Elementor 4.0 is a big deal, we need to explain the problem it's trying to solve. When people say a website is bloated, they usually mean the website is carrying more behind the scenes weight than it needs. The page might look perfectly normal to a visitor. The headline looks fine, the buttons look fine, the images look fine. But behind the scenes, the browser had to read and process all the structure that was used to create the page. A simple way to think about it is packaging. Imagine you order one sandwich. Instead of handing you the sandwich in one wrapper, the restaurant puts it inside a small box and then puts that box inside a bigger box and then puts that box inside another box, and then it puts the whole thing inside a delivery bag. The sandwich is still there, you still get what you ordered, but there is a lot more packaging than necessary. That is roughly what people meant when they criticized Elementor for creating too much div soup. A div is just a basic container in web design. Think of it like an invisible box that holds something on the page. One box is normal. Sometimes you need a few boxes to control the layout and styling. The problem is when a simple thing like a button or a heading ends up wrapped in several unnecessary boxes. So instead of the browser seeing, here's a button, it sees something more like, here's a box, inside another box, inside another box, and inside that box is the button. Now, one button is not a disaster, but a full web page has headings, buttons, images, forms, icons, columns, sections, menus, testimonials, and calls to action. When every element carries extra structure, the whole page becomes heavier. And when the page is heavier, the browser has to do more work before it can show the page to the visitor. That matters most on mobile, where people may be on slower connections, older phones, or weaker processing power. This is why Elementor developed a reputation for being easy to use, but not always the cleanest or lightest option compared with newer builders like Bricks or Breakdance. And to be clear, this does not mean Elementor websites had to be slow. Elementor has been our builder of choice here at Pronto because it gives business owners and marketing teams the ability to edit websites without depending on a developer for every small change. With the right technical setup, good hosting, optimized images, clean design choices, careful plugin management, and proper performance work, Elementor sites can still be fast. But the page builder is part of the foundation. And if that foundation creates more weight than necessary, performance optimization becomes harder than it needs to be. And that's why Elementor 4.0 matters. If Elementor can keep the ease of use clients benefit from while reducing the extra weight behind the scenes, it becomes easier for everyone to build fast, editable business websites with Elementor. Okay, so the big idea behind Elementor 4.0 is something Elementor calls Atomic Editor. I know that the name might sound technical, but the concept is relatively simple. Elementor is moving towards smaller, cleaner building blocks. Instead of relying so heavily on older widgets that came with lots of built-in structure, Elementor 4.0 introduces a newer system where elements are more lightweight, more consistent, and easier to control across a whole website. The most important part is this. Elementor says its new atomic elements are designed to produce cleaner output with fewer unnecessary wrapper layers. In its own documentation, Elementor says these atomic elements render without additional wrapper layers, which contributes to cleaner output and improved Google Core Web Vitals. And if you're not familiar with Core Web Vitals, think of them as Google's way of measuring whether a page feels good to use. They look at things like, does this content load quickly? Does the page respond quickly when someone clicks or taps? Does the layout stay stable, or do things jump around while the page is loading? So when we talk about cleaner code and fewer unnecessary layers, this is why it matters. It is not just a developer preference. It can affect how fast the page feels, how smooth the experience is, and how easy the site is to optimize for real visitors. That's the technical change. So in very simple terms, Elementor is trying to make the website carry less unnecessary packaging. The page can still look the same on the front end, and the visitor may not see any visual difference. But behind the scenes, the structure can be cleaner. So what does this actually mean if you're a business owner planning a new website? There are 3 practical takeaways. First, a cleaner website foundation can make performance optimization easier. That doesn't mean every Elementor 4.0 website will automatically be fast. A website can still be slow for many reasons. You can still upload massive images, you can still use too many plugins, you can still add too many tracking scripts, you can still use cheap hosting, you can still design a page with too many animations, videos, and heavy sections. You get the picture. Elementor 4.0 does not fix all of that magically, but it does address one important part of the performance equation, the structure generated by the builder itself. And that matters because when the builder is cleaner, your developer or agency is not fighting as much unnecessary weight before they even start optimizing the site. Think of it like building a house. You can still make bad design choices with a good foundation, but if the foundation itself is cleaner, better engineered, everything else becomes easier to manage. This is what Elementor 4.0 is trying to improve. Second, Elementor 4.0 is not only about speed, it's also about consistency. This is where things like variables, classes, and components come in. Again, those terms sound technical, but the business benefit is simple. So let's say your website has the same brand color, the same button style, the same heading style, and the same spacing across dozens of pages. In the old way of building websites, those styles could easily become scattered. One button is styled one way on the home page, another button is styled slightly different on the service page, a landing page uses a different spacing, a blog template uses a slightly different heading style. Over time, the website becomes harder to manage because every page has its own little decisions baked into it. A system-based website works differently. Instead of manually restyling the same things over and over, you can define the core styles once and then reuse them. So if your brand color changes, you do not need to hunt through 50 pages. You can update the color in one place and the change will carry through the entire site. For a business owner, this matters because your website is not a one-time project. Your website changes. You add new services, you update calls to action, you create landing pages, you change offers, you refresh branding, you test new page layouts. The more your website is built as a system, the easier those changes become. Okay, and now third, Elementor 4.0 makes Elementor more defensible as a long-term website platform. For a while, the argument against Elementor was fairly simple. Elementor is easy for clients, but cleaner builders are better for performance. And that argument is one reason why builders like Bricks and Breakdance gained attention. Breakdance, for example, has publicly positioned itself against Elementor around performance, smaller page size, reduced bloat, and avoiding unnecessary divs. Its own comparison page even uses the term divception to describe unnecessary divs in page output. So Elementor 4.0 matters because Elementor is not ignoring that criticism, it is responding to it directly. That does not mean Elementor automatically becomes the fastest builder in every situation. It does not mean bricks and breakdance no longer have advantages. And it definitely does not mean that old Elementor sites instantly become clean and fast. But it does mean the conversation has changed. The old argument was Elementor is easy but bloated. The new question is, if Elementor keeps the ease of use, the ecosystem, and the client friendliness, and now starts improving the technical foundation, does it become the better choice for a lot of business websites again? This is why this release matters. Now, if you already have an Elementor website, the natural question is, do I need to update? Do I need to rebuild my site? Am I missing out if my site was built on an older Elementor system? The short answer is no, you do not need to panic. Elementor has been very clear that existing sites do not need to rebuild just because version 4 is available. Existing sites can continue using the older Elementor widgets, and you can gradually introduce the new atomic elements where it makes sense. So if your current Elementor site is working well, this is not a reason to rush into a full rebuild, but there are a few practical guidelines. Do not rebuild just for the sake of rebuilding. Instead, ask better questions. Is the site actually slow? Are we failing at our core web vitals? Is the site difficult to maintain? Are pages inconsistent? Are we already planning a redesign or major refresh? If the answer is yes, then Elementor 4.0 becomes relevant. If you're starting a new Elementor website from scratch, the advice is different. Use the new atomic system from the beginning. Build with atomic elements where possible. Set up your variables and your classes early. Think of the site as a design system, not just a collection of individual pages. This might take slightly more planning up front, but it should make the website easier to maintain later. If you're choosing between Elementor bricks and breakdance, Elementor 4.0 makes the decision more interesting. Before, the simple comparison was often Elementor is easier and more widely adopted, bricks and breakdance are cleaner and more performance focused. And that's still partly true. But Elementor 4.0 narrows the gap by directly addressing one of Elementor's biggest weaknesses. So did Elementor 4.0 completely fix every criticism people had about Elementor? No. And I would be careful of anyone who says that. A website can be slow if it is badly built. Elementor can still be misused, and performance still depends on many things: hostings, images, plugins, strips, fonts, design choices, and how carefully the site is maintained. But Elementor 4.0 is still a major update because it shows Elementor is addressing the right problem. Not just adding more features, not just making the editor look different, but actually changing the foundation of how Elementor sites are built. For business owners, that means the Elementor conversation is different than it was a year ago. If you heard that Elementor was bloated or outdated, that criticism had some truth behind it. But version 4.0 is Elementor's answer to that criticism. The real takeaway is this: Elementor 4.0 does not magically make every Elementor website fast, but it does make Elementor a more serious option again for businesses that want a flexible, editable WordPress website without ignoring performance. So if you are planning for a new website, redesigning an old Elementor website, or comparing Elementor with other WordPress builders, this is an update worth understanding. And if you want practical, honest WordPress advice without the hype, consider subscribing. We publish videos to help business owners make better decisions about their website.